Welcome everyone to the first ever WazaMedia podcast. My name is JR and I am joined by
Andrew Milner. I
and
am
we're going to work on
one
these
of the founding
introductions.
members of WazaMedia.
Very cool. And I am grateful for Andrew for bringing me on board onto this fine company. And with our first podcast, I think one of the things we need to let our audience know is what are we going to use this podcast for? So what do you think we're gonna do this for, Andrew?
I think this is a great space to talk about what's going on in the communication space, marketing space, and really kind of let companies know the things they need to keep their ears to the ground on and be aware of what's going on. And we can, use our experience in, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, our experience later on, but use our experience to just kind of give suggestions, tips, and ideas. And then from there, I hope we get some good communication from the audience and we can adjust to topics that would be helpful.
And with the pandemic, it's we're filming this in August of 2020. The pandemic has caused a national emergency in March of this year. So March, April, May, June, July, August. We're about 6 months into this craziness. Can you believe it?
No, it kind of feels like we hit a COVID time warp. And I think I was talking to somebody earlier today. It's like the days are long, but the year's moving quickly. So it's kind of strange.
I almost wanted a reset button when it came to June or July. I'm like, I'm ready to hit the reset button and like do 2020 over again.
I know we don't get to do that though. And, I'm an optimist though. I think that the struggles and the trials and the strain from 2020 will produce a lot of good. I mean, I'm not gonna rose color everything, and say that it's gonna be all good, but I think we should keep our eye out for the good, and it will be there.
You talked about how some about innovation kind of touched up on it, and there's been a lot of innovation the last 6 months from companies that are going from brick and mortar places where they can't be in physical spaces to delivery to all virtual to the just being online. There's just so many changes that have been going on from the physical business aspect. But I know with what we do with WazaMedia, when it comes to communication, there's definitely been a change in how people and businesses have been communicating with each other to B2B and then B2C. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to see moving
Oh yeah.
forward on how we're going to continue this type of interaction and this way of engagement with the audience. So, Andrew, I think with every good beginning episode of a podcast, we need to start talking about our origin. We need to find out a little bit of
Our
who we
origin
are.
story. Well,
Yeah,
we originated from, it was a galaxy right over there.
from a galaxy far, far away.
No, well, so I guess how far do you want to go back? Because the origins go all the way back to 2006, well before the company even established, in the sense that the first idea of the name Waza started when I was in Japan, and I had the opportunity to regularly meet with a very, I would say, very successful. I didn't quite realize how successful, but very successful Japanese businessman. Um, you know, I was naive to that I didn't realize that when I was staying with him, we were in the top penthouse suite in a very large city in Japan that equals something. So it's like, oh, okay. But regardless, he was always willing to share some knowledge and insight. And so I've always thought about businesses and business ideas, and um, I one of them was the idea of a it's kind of like it was similar to Etsy, but it was before Etsy idea. And so the idea of craftsmanship, handmade things. And so I remember telling this guy about that idea, and he introduced me to the kanji waza, which is to be great at your craft. Which at that point, I was thinking physical crafts, or physically made objects like, tables or art or paintings. But that over time, especially as I was more and more in the field of communications for, the military and beyond that, um, I the idea switched of it. Well, actually, being great at your craft, a craft could be even in the digital space, like building websites, graphics design, photography, even crafting a well thought out communications plan. And so that's where I came up with WazaMedia. And so that's kind of the name origin story. But that didn't, that name in this company didn't actually start until 7 years after that point. So in 2013, kind of a soft start, but ramped pretty quickly into a solid 2 years of work there. And then it's kind of morphed and changed over the years. And now we're kind of in a, what do we call this, a relaunch of the company.
Yeah, I think this would be a new relaunch, and it's interesting that we're doing it during a pandemic. And I was looking on something on
Better time.
YouTube about about certain companies that started out during the Great Depression and how coming up with ideas then and how they flourished. And one of them that I found out was Fender. It was the guitar amp company, and
Mhm.
they wanted I'm gonna try to put my memory brains back together and put those cells together. But if I remember correctly from the video, there was a need for playing music because there's really not much to do during the Great Depression. So they needed some way to pass the time, and that was entertainment. And so, in order to amplify the music so it could be heard by more people, an amplifier was created. And so the birth of the amplifier made by Fender came about. And that was because of a need during a time of the Great Depression that they needed a solution to a problem. So I think with us starting or relaunching WazaMedia during this time, we're seeing that there are problems out there, and we have the ability to find those solutions for customers.
Absolutely. And, it's kind of the idea behind this podcast is just kind of be innovative, continue to change. I'm going to do something really awkward for those that if anybody is actually watching online, I'm going to totally flip my screen. There we go. Because it's going to sound weird, but from a communication standpoint, this is relevant to what we talk about. But in the way I needed to look at you was actually making me look off screen. And because, when you're trained in something, you're trained to see it. And so I was seeing myself look off screen, even though I was trying to look at you. Anyways, couldn't go on. And I knew, especially when I knew there was a simple fix and it was a checkbox.
It's perfectly okay. The There's our first run on the podcast. We're gonna iron this out the more we do this, and I know there's gonna be more. So I think it's okay to run through a couple bumps along the way. Rome was not
Yeah,
built in
well,
a
and
day.
topic for the future should be looking good on your video calls. So
I will write that down for a future podcast.
before
Because
we
then,
depart, go ahead.
no, I'm just writing it down right now, just so because I forget a lot of things, so I have actually a ton of Post-it notes around here. So these are pink ones that I've got around here. I've got some green ones and I've got some blue ones. So I am stacked and ready. If there's an idea that needs to pop up, I've got a Post-it for it. So idea saved.
So keeping with the theme of kind of getting the origins out there, do you want to you tell the kind of this phase two part and how this got started?
Yes. So being a small child, I've always been dabbling into business things. Nothing of great grandeur or anything of that sort. One of the many business ventures I did as a kid was in elementary school. I noticed that there was a short supply of candy, and so what my dad and I talked with my dad about this was people were doing fundraisers for whatever cause, but then they would stop selling candy for that fundraiser. I kind of found out it was an opportunity to make some extra dough, and so I came up with a deal with my dad to buy a bunch of candy that wasn't either being available or not being currently sold, so to match my competitors at the time who were fundraising. So we went to Costco and picked out the candy that I wanted, and I would put them in a plastic, in some type of big Ziploc bag, and I would just stand in a high traffic area, which was actually near the toilets, near the water fountain, when I was playing, and I would just stand there with my bag of candy, and people could see it because there was a Ziploc bag, and I found an opportunity to just make a little bit of money doing that. So that was one of the business ventures in there. So dabbling into business as a kid kind of led me on, and I did some trading cards here and there, and then did a small photography business, did weddings, learned more about business as I got on. But I think talking to you, Andrew, really opened my eyes into more about the business world, and our talks and how we connected and the things that you taught me just was made me more insightful about life in the business world, even as an entrepreneur. And then when we would talk about some of the business people who are innovating and continuing to innovate every day and going against the status quo and standing out a bit against the crowd. And that was when we talked about stuff like that, that was really inspiring, and I wanted to keep doing it. So I was really, really happy that I got we when we talked about coming together with WazaMedia, I was totally on board. So I'm grateful for this partnership and working with you in order to make this company great, but also being able to help uh, those who need a better communications plan, need a marketing strategy, especially to tell their story in this current pandemic, COVID-19
Right.
2020 digital world. So I'm looking forward to continuing this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and on that, um, you know, it's just good to be creative in this time. You know, don't assume that you have to do it the way you've done it. It's easy to get in that rut. So, you know, a situation like this can force, which sometimes we need to be forced to take that step back and try it a new way.
Speaking of trying new things, one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed this too during this whole pandemic, is everyone is including mom and pop businesses are utilizing more delivery services. As the beginning of the pandemic, most people can go into a brick and mortar restaurant or a coffee shop or anything of that sort. So going into either having their own delivery service where someone would take orders but either by the phone and deliver, or even going on a delivery app like Uber Eats or Postmates, or how many are there now? There's so many now.
I'm starting to
Door
lose track. Yeah, for sure.
DoorDash. Uh, there's just so many different options now in which even the small mom and pop businesses can expand their reach by using a delivery app, and so they can continue to run business. And it's something of that has this pandemic has forced a different mindset for how business should be run, can be run, especially with the new constraints that are here.
Yeah. And I actually have reflected too on how fortunate we are we are, meaning we here in the US in particular, but many other countries as well, that the trend towards delivery services, trends towards grocery pickup, all of that foundationally was it was started before the pandemic, and so you had the infrastructure in place, and it was just a matter of having to scale it up for all the influx of the new businesses that had to do it to survive.
I am still waiting. I'm not sure which company is going to do it in the US, but I want my pizza delivered via drone. Will they do that anytime soon? I mean, it's no contact. It's
Well,
it,
I would have said, I would have said that drone delivery in any kind of mass scale was pretty far off because it relied upon getting past government bureaucracy. But I would have said that pre-COVID. I don't know. I think that COVID is pushing a lot of things forward that would have gotten stuck. Not to say it would have never happened, but like um, things take a while when you're having to deal with government legislation or government bureaucracy or just old ways of doing things. And but then you create this extreme situation and things move at unprecedented paces sometimes. So all that to say is that COVID might have, I guess, made it more likely that you're going to have that pizza from a drone sooner. I don't know. I'm thinking if I were to ballpark my own, for what it's worth, prediction, I'd say you'd see pizzas coming via drone in the next 5 years.
that would be pretty awesome. There's a perfect spot like right in my backyard if I just put one of those orange circle things and then I spray paint, deliver pizza here. I think that'll work. I think that'll work. Um, Going on with these list of questions I have prepared for this first podcast,
Related.
trying to be prepared for this one. Let's what was when you started out with WazaMedia, what was the hardest part of starting it out? Tell me about the beginning years, the some of the bumps in the road that you may have had.
Um, Not knowing what I didn't know was big. And even though I read slash watched slash listened to content like this from much more successful people talking about well, and actually there was multiple people. There was a just dive in or plan really well, but even the jump in people really highlighted the planning. I don't know that I listened to that as much as I should have. Just really building out a plan, doing more looking into a focus. I think that it was very easy to look at everything I had experience in, and my business partner at the time had experience in, and then just create a palette of all of those um, skills, and then suddenly offer that. And it isn't about knowing how to do something and how to offer it as a service or a product are two different things, because you have to build systems, um, customer experience systems, um, product delivery systems, and then also systems for making sure you get paid in a timely manner so you can keep food on the table if it's your sole, income, which for me it was for the most part. And so that was a lot to figure out all at once, all at the same time. And some of it could have been figured out before stepping out. But you figure out a lot under pressure. I will say that.
I feel that in my journey, I've learned a lot from making my own mistakes.
Hmm.
But knowing that other people have made mistakes, if I had learned from them, from their mistakes, I wouldn't have made the same mistakes that they have. So I think I should have learned those from the books that I've read. But sometimes you don't know until you come up on that situation.
Yeah. And I think if I would summarize what I would do differently at the start was to offer less, but do that less very, very well, and focus on getting paid and not undervaluing what I did, you know. And I say focus on getting paid. What I mean is that, you know, there's of all the administrative stuff to tackle, you know, like getting registered and form an LLC or, you know, all that stuff. It's like just get a free invoice software. You're good. You know, it's like get going, get things moving, get the cash flowing, and then you can start ironing out some of the other administrative details once you get cash flowing.
Let's go back to our origin story. Now, you and
Yep,
I,
that galaxy.
back in a galaxy far, far away, uh, we we are both veterans of the United States military. You
Mm-hmm.
are,
Hoorah, Semper Fi, Marine
and
Corps.
I
Yeah.
still under the Department of Navy.
Yes.
And I am a former active duty in the Army. So with our, I, how much of your communication experience being in the Marine Corps, how much do you feel has helped you with your business?
A lot, but I think it's hard to articulate because it's a accumulation. You know, everything from, you know, focusing on how to make a video focused on a particular audience to achieve a particular goal, you know, to strategizing much larger campaigns with multiple elements. You know, it's just, I mean, I lived this all the way from high school essentially, because even in high school I supported my church in their multimedia department, and then went to a digital media course, and that kind of all influenced me choosing the public affairs field, which, you know, got me down the strategic communications route. um, but yeah, I am super grateful that um, I have a career that is multifaceted, but still all around the every area of strategic communications and planning and things like that.
You've
Which
been
I
in
guess now at this point, yeah, sorry, yeah, at this point, how old am I? So yeah, it's been like 15 years.
you've been in communications longer than I have. My communications experience started about 6 years ago when I made the transition from being an Army Nurse Corps officer to a public affairs officer when I was in Germany. And that came about through finding out about a job in public relations, and that my inquiry about is this job available came out to be an application to become an acceptance. So a lot of things happened really, really fast, kind of threw my supervisors um, a little off and surprised, which surprised me too, but it was out of anyone's control. But the organization that I was inquiring about this position really needed someone to do public affairs work for this medical unit that did medical services and provided medical support in Africa, the Middle East, and all over Europe. And so by one of the things they asked about was, can I take a photo? And so having done photography, wedding photography, portraits,
Mm.
and headshots, I was able to provide them my civilian portfolio, things that I did on the side and things I did with the small company that I did when I was in North Carolina, just dabbling in business and learning more about it. It was more of an experimentation than an actual, I would say, a full-fledged business. But I took every lesson that I learned from there, and I continued to build upon my knowledge and my experience to wherever I moved to. And it led me to be crossing over from being a nurse. I was working in the emergency department, doing emergency trauma care of that sort, and being into a communicator. And so I believe, number one, that was how I wanted to serve my country. But then number two, I felt like I had a knack in being able to communicate through visually, through video, through photo, written word. And then I really learned about the strategic communications part. And you brought this up earlier about the importance of about strategic communications, is because where we were providing support in 3 different continents. And the story that we, as an Army organization providing medical support in these areas, was huge. So we needed to make sure that our messaging was on point, that every unit that was going on, that was going out to different places, I had to make sure they had uh, a little bit of training before they got out there, because not only are they doing medical care, providing medical support, when they're talking with the locals, they're pretty much being ambassadors of the United States military and of the United States of America. So there was a strategic part that needed to be placed, and making sure those pieces came together along with what we did, providing medical support, and then telling our story, became multifaceted and a part of this larger campaign and this plan. And being able to do that, and then years later doing other things in PR and public relations, I've grown to love and enjoy working every day in this field. There
I think, sorry, go
are
ahead.
there are no days that I miss being at the bedside, and but but I do miss the team that I worked with. I miss the medics that I worked with, the docs,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
nurses. When a code comes in, and when we worked very fluid as a team, because we rehearsed for the worst case scenario, and we rehearsed it as many times as we could to make sure when that that person who was in a motor vehicular crash comes in, we know what to do, we know our places at the bedside, we know what roles we need to take. And the goal was not to do it in how Hollywood always does it, where everyone's yelling and screaming and throwing blood, and none of that needs to happen during a code. It's supposed to be calm, quiet. It's very in process, and everyone is in sync to what role they need to do. And it should be that you can move and quickly, but you should be able to hear each other with uh, just very regular conversation volume voice. No yelling, no screaming, just calm, collected, because this is a very intense moment. So, and I think working in that very stressful environment helped me with crisis communication, especially as I've had to do a lot of crisis communication planning over the last several years.
I think too, for me, as you know, I've just kind of gone through the years, is realizing that kind of like what you were saying about your situation with your team. You didn't realize at the time how much you were engaging in, communications techniques, communication planning, either, even learning to communicate well in that environment. So communications and the strategy behind communications permeates everything. So in that sense, um, everyone's doing it. It's just whether or not you've studied it and have, the experience to recognize and label things in such a way where you can actually be more intentional about your communications. Um, I think too, it's fascinating to me just thinking about all the and bringing it back to business. So much communicates. Even your absence, say from social media, your absence from having a more modern website, all of that communicates something, in both directions you're communicating. So it's not if you're communicating, it's how you are. So it's just how are you communicating? And then you can ask the question, what are you communicating, whether intentionally or unintentionally?
Going back to the how, these are all the, I mean, everything is on these phones now. These little devices that everyone's got one. I'm wondering when my kids are going to get their own cell phone. My, they're they're going to get one. I just don't know when. But these little devices have really leveled the playing field. They're for distribution method and how people are getting it.
Mhm.
I've got my old dinky Apple Watch 2 on my left wrist, and I'm wondering if this is the rage now as technology gets on. Will it be even more compact? Will it be where I don't have a phone, where it would just be on my wrist? Will it be this size? And how do I adapt message? What message can I put onto a small device like this if this is all the rage?
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, we that was really jam packed. That first couple questions that we
Yeah.
ran into. That was really good.
No, I think, yeah, we've got plenty of content. We can even preview like some of the content we didn't have a chance to cover today. But, I think right there in general, what you just said about the cell phone, actually, we could probably spend a full episode talking about use case of like cell phones leveraging that technology, that supercomputer that's in everybody's pockets now. So I
To
look forward
think
to that.
this computer was this little computer that's in a phone is more powerful than what was the computer in the 1970s where
Yeah,
they had
I forget the
computing
name of
power.
it, but we're talking way more at this point, way more.
And I'm trying to remember the picture in my head in which it was a server room, a really large room with all these gizmos and gadgets, and it was this huge room just for computing power, and this little device has more power than that. So the technology is getting better every day. Innovations are happening all the time, and it's interesting. I'm excited to see what's next. Is it? I remember reading something about the new Google Glass that's coming in, but it's not going to be made by Google. It's going to be made by Apple. So I've been following some of the rumor sites. I want to see what they do because I don't know if I told you, Andrew. I actually have Google Glass.
I didn't know that.
I have it. I bought it a couple years ago because I wanted to be the first to get it. The problem I had with it, the battery dies too quickly. So I would put it on, I would kind of finagle with it, but it would die after, I think, 20, 30 minutes. So I had one of those,
That's sad.
it was sad. And I got one of those battery packs and those battery chargers, and I put that in my pocket. So I've got Google Glass and I got this weird wire charging cable that's going from my eyes down to my pocket. It just looked weird. But I wanted to be first to get it because it was cool. I wanted to be a trendsetter. But I'm not always jumping on the new tech. I think after that, realizing that that was kind of a bust, I think that was my trigger or that turning point in which I think I want to wait for the next iteration for most things and go from there.
Yeah, yeah. I would say I agree. I agree with you, maybe with some exceptions, but for the most part, I agree.
There is an exciting part about being the early adopter for something that's
Hmm.
new and coming out. There is something about that, and it's exciting. It's new. It's innovative. It may solve the world's problems. It may solve my problems more than the world's problems. But being able to dive in and just get my hands into it, it's just there's something exciting about that.
I agree. Look forward to, yeah, talking about that in the future. And so, yeah, as we kind of close out, is there anything, I guess, that we should highlight about expectations, or just bid everyone adieu?
There's two things. Number one, we just launched our brand new website last week. It's Waza.media. So
Mhm.
WAZA.MEDIA. So that is brand spanking new. I like the site a lot.
Yep, go check it out. And if you have a moment, comment. What's your thoughts? What does it communicate to you?
And then the second thing I have, Andrew, is I've been trying to play along a way with how to engage our audience in an audio and also video format as you're watching this, both or you're one or the other, because we're making sure we provide this podcast in both video form and in audio form. But there's an engagement part that I think we need to do, and I think we'll try it this time. If it doesn't work, we'll try something new. I think that's the fun part about experimenting with something new, and I think it's I think we should ask the audience a question, and then they can at us on Twitter or Instagram, and then put hashtag Ask WazaMedia to see if we can spur some engagement that way. What do you
So
think?
that would be at WazaMedia, WazaMedia,
On
and then
Twitter,
hashtag. What was the hashtag again?
it would be
Ask.
hashtag
What?
it would be hashtag Ask WazaMedia.
Okay, very cool. You're
So
gonna hit them with the question.
I am gonna hit them with the question, and we've been talking about COVID and pandemic. So I'm gonna ask the WazaMedia Nation. WazaMedia Nation. This is a question for you. What do you miss the most pre-COVID? What do you miss the most pre-COVID? And
And
would
how about
like to
we answer
hear.
that question at the start of the next episode? We will give
I
our answers.
I like that, and we could also point out some answers that we get from the audience along with that. This is cool. I like this. All right, note. I put it in a note in my post-it note. We're good to go. All right. I think we're gonna
High
call
tech.
it, Andrew.
All right. I keep want to say good night since it's night right now, but it could be watching at any time. Good night, good day, good whatever you're heading off to.
Signing off.